Hello and welcome back to our pre-employment webinars. Now, we're aware that some of you have never really gone away and have continued to work throughout the holiday period, but nevertheless, we hope you've managed to get at least some kind of well-deserved break. Straight away, you might have noticed a subtle change in our title from Maths and English to pre-employment, and this is really because math functional skills is more sort of business as usual. So we can now sort of broaden out the range of updates and information on our other qualifications and support during the course of these webinars. So start with the usual housekeeping, the points to assist you. We are recording this session before anybody asks. The slides and the recording will, as we usually do, make these available on our Maths and English resource hub and web page. So there'll be a recording as well as a copy of the slides. We have put everybody on mute for this session, and currently the question box is unavailable, but we will be turning that back on again towards the end of the webinar as we dedicate some time to this for you. And last but by no means least, if you are having any issues, and we always say this at the beginning of any of these sessions, do please try logging out and logging back in, and somehow that seems to work. If that doesn't work, you can also potentially join this session by telephone by selecting phone call in the audio pane. So I'm going to turn my camera off at this point, and we'll do the introductions.
Afternoon, everybody. So as you may have noticed, you have all three of us on the webinar today, but Paul's quickly disappeared. He's way ahead of me. So you've got myself, Catherine Reid. I'm one of your technical advisors, providing you with guidance and support across maths, English, employability and ESOL qualifications. We also have Amanda, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello everybody, I'm Amanda Kelly. I'm the industry manager for Maths, English, ESOL and employability. So that means I liaise with our internal stakeholders and other organisations outside of City and Guilds to try and look after the portfolio of qualifications and products and services.
Thank you. And last but no means least, Paul, who has disappeared.
I'm still here. You can still hear me. I'm Paul Senior. I'm also a technical advisor, kind of providing sort of guidance and support across all of our Maths, English, ESOL and employability qualifications, at least for the next few weeks.
Yeah. So we have turned off the question function box for the moment. We will be turning this back on towards the end of the webinar, as we will allocate time to answering as many questions as we can. So, so as not to disrupt the webinar, we are going to turn off our cameras now, but we will be putting them back on later on in the webinar, fingers crossed.
So for this academic year, we thought it might be more helpful for everyone if we shared our plans for supporting you from the start of the year. I'm pleased to say that we've managed to get our face-to-face networks back on the road, and we are hoping to get to most regions before the end of the academic year. We'll continue to offer online opportunities to keep in touch, and we'll call these virtual link-ups. They will be shorter versions of our face-to-face Connect Share networks. After the success of last year, we're keeping the new online sessions for new staff and new centres called New to Us. These are a chance to go through everything that you need to get started with delivering City and Guilds Maths and English qualifications. Our webinars will be continuing, but in a slightly different format, so that we can share updates and important information as it happens, rather than squeezing it all into a monthly slot. And as you can see, we've got 2 further webinars just this month. Another new feature for us is podcasts. We're planning to introduce this soon, and we'll let you know when they will be available. We're just firming up our guest lists now. You can find a list of all the support with dates and links for registration via the Resource Hub webpage, and there's a link to that here. Remember, the best way for us to share information with you when it happens is for you to sign up for email updates, and the link to choose your preferences about what we connect with you can be found at the bottom of any City and Guilds webpage.
Okay, well, this is the schedule of networks so far. As you can see, pretty jam-packed schedule of networks, virtual link-ups and webinars and online meetings. So this is really just to sort of take us through to Christmas. We are still working on a few more face-to-face network venues. So we're just sort of confirming those, hopefully somewhere in the West Midlands, somewhere in the Northeast, and possibly in the South before Christmas. So yeah, do look out for those. For all of these, you can register via the events, webinar and networks webpage. And obviously, as we get closer to Christmas, we'll start sharing our plans for the following 3 months, kind of up to March.
Thanks, Paul. And we've actually added some more of those on today, so we will be updating that as well on the web page. As many of you are all now aware, COVID restrictions have come to an end as of the 31st of August. We will be shortly updating instructions for conducting examinations document, or the ICE document as we like to refer to it, which can be found on the 4748 qualification page. We will be removing the blue lozenges which contain the adaptations that were created to mitigate against the impact of COVID. With adaptations coming to an end, we wanted to just highlight some points. Speaking, listening and communicating assessments can continue to be carried out remotely. We always intended to offer this form of assessment, but COVID accelerated the introduction. Please ensure that you read the guidance to ensure that you follow the correct procedure for using this. For example, where speaking, listening, communicating assessments take place remotely, you do have to record them. With changing the date or time of a functional skills exam, you are required to give an exam date and time when you book the exam in walled garden, and wherever possible, this is when the exam should take place. However, it is possible to change these where there are resourcing issues or the candidate is unavailable. There is a helpful table in the ICE document which explains that you can move the exam up to 5 working days before or after the original date for paper-based exams, and up to 10 calendar days before or after for Evolve, so that's the online exams. You need to advise City and Guilds of any changes, and you must keep a record of when necessary, that's necessary for when you do change the date. Now, this is not a COVID adaptation, but rather has always been the norm for us, and we are continuing with this way of working. We have always allowed exams to take place in the workplace and employers to invigilate, and this will continue. However, again, do refer back to the ICE document, which provides you with invigilation requirements.
Now, as you will know, the end of life for Adobe Flash products came at the end of 2020. Our current functional skills exams are delivered in the Surpass Evolve platform, which allows Flash content to be viewed securely. And at the moment, sample on-screen materials, such as the example tests on the 4748 information tab on the qualification page, or through OpenAssess, have to use the Surpass viewer in order to take sample tests or for tutors to mark and review the tests, because this has all been built in Flash, which is no longer available for through a regular browser. We are moving our assessment materials to HTML, but this project has to be managed very carefully because we're talking about live assessments. We will share progress and an early sight of the new appearance as soon as we can, but we're expecting this to be late February or early March, so you'll hear from us on a regular basis as we make progress with this.
And as we sort of moving into a new academic year, it's also worth just reminding briefly about the range of access arrangements that are possible within, particularly functional skills assessments and the process for applying these. There's often here a bit of a temptation to get bogged down in process without necessarily thinking as much about the stage before that, sort of really considering whether or how it's reasonable to apply an adjustment to the assessment in the first place. In the case of functional skills, each qualification handbook has got quite a detailed section and a table setting out the range of what can be considered, as well as a formal definition of the skill set being assessed. For example, reading within functional skills English is defined as the independent understanding of written language. So any access arrangements, and this is a really important point, cannot undermine the fundamentals of what's being assessed. So, for example, that's why it's not possible for anyone being assessed in reading to be assisted by a human reader. However, a candidate could potentially use screen reading software if they are able to do so independently, and that's their normal way of working. So first step always is to look at the handbook, but once you've consulted that, there are two other policy and process documents that you'll need to be familiar with, both of which can be accessed from our centre document library. The when and how document, as we tend to call it, clarifies when permission needs to be sought, either upfront or retrospectively, and the process for doing so. It also confirms the types of evidence that need to be available to justify the use of an access arrangement. You'll sometimes see these documents referring to something called special considerations. That only really applies to fixed date exams where learners might have been disadvantaged in some way in the immediate period before or during an exam on a set date. And they might, in those situations, potentially need to wait several months or even a whole year for the next opportunity to resit. It's less of an issue with most of our pre-employment qualifications, since all of the assessments for these are available year-round. Worth also just mentioning the JCQ access arrangements and reasonable adjustments document, as that can be useful background reading, although, to be clear, the only Sitting Guilds qualifications directly covered by it are our technicals at level 2 and level 3. Again, there is a copy of that, or it can be accessed via the centre documents library.
In addition to, I seem to have a little echo there. In addition to digital full certificates and certificates of unit credit, CUCs, customers will now be able to access digital versions of notifications of candidates' results via the e-certificates portal. The enhancement was made on the 8th of August and enables customers to view and download the NCRs as required instead of receiving a printed paper copy. You can opt out of receiving receiving paper NCRs or other paper relating to certification. Customers, you can update your print preferences on your walled garden account.
Now, hot off the press, we have just introduced today a completely new set of live entry-level assessments. The new samples were uploaded to the website about a month ago now, and the live versions were added today, together with new passwords which have been put up in the administration section of Walled Garden. We're going to go through the changes to our entry-level assessments during a special webinar next week on Thursday, the 8th of September, and this too will be recorded. The reformed qualifications were introduced 3 years ago now, and it's usual to review qualifications once they've been up and running as a matter of course. But of course, COVID interrupted proceedings, so this has only been done over the summer. This is an opportunity for you to hear about what is new, and including the introduction of a requirement for you to share your assessment tracking with City and Guilds.
So it wouldn't be a it wouldn't be a poll. It wouldn't be a webinar without a poll. So just before we start to move on to the sort of next section where we're going to talk a little bit about how our resources can support teaching and learning, we're just going to sort of ask you a very quick poll question to give us a little bit of a flavour of how and which of our digital resources you're familiar with, or indeed which of those you have no idea about. So I'm just going to, if the technology works, going to launch the poll now. And you're welcome to tick more than these. What we'll do also is just turn the question box back on again. So if you wanted to sort of elaborate on the not using any of these or not heard of any of these, you are able to sort of do so using the Q&A box. So we'll give the poll a few more moments to complete. I think it's just over half you voted so far. Just over 2/3 now, so we'll just give you a few more seconds. Three-quarters exactly now. Okay. I'm going to close the poll at this point, and then I will share the outcome just to give you a flavour of what we've been seeing. So it looks like most of you, or certainly over half of you, are familiar with Smart Screen. Quite a lot of you Open Assess and Centre Analytics. Slightly fewer with eFunctional Skills, and a few of you obviously not saying you don't currently work with any of those. But thank you very much for your responses to those. I'll hide those again, and we'll move on.
Thank you for that, and that's really, really useful for us to know. To help you with your learners' functional skills journey, we have digital platforms that can support teaching and learning, the ones that we mentioned earlier in the poll. So firstly, the Smart Screen, which is a platform which provides digital teaching and learning resources for tutors and learners. We also provide you with scheme of work. I do apologise, I'm having some technical issues this side, so I've got screens jumping all over the place, so I do apologise. So we've got Smart Screen, let me start again, which is a platform that provides you with digital teaching and learning resources for tutors and learners, providing you with schemes of work, interactive e-learning worksheets, activities, speaking and listening videos, and a large selection of maths and English videos. Then we have eFunctional Skills, giving learners an independent online learning experience, from providing their initial assessment to creating a diagnostic to determine your learner's level. And from that, individual learning plans are produced, and the learner can work independently through their allocated work, or the tutor can load their own resources and share with other tutors. Then the learner can test their skills in testing their knowledge and mock tests. To prepare a learner for taking an online exam, we have our Open Assess platform, which replicates the live Evolve platform, and we will talk about this in more detail in just a moment. Then finally, there is Centre Analytics, which allows candidate performance data to be aggregated and interrogated. And also just a reminder that this platform also provides you with provisional score reports for both paper and online exams.
So Catherine mentioned Open Assess just now. Open Assess has got a new feature. Following some feedback from customers who are using it, we have now made it possible for you to select which version of the sample paper you want to schedule for your learner. We've updated the user guide to include this information, and you'll be able to tell whether you're using the new version because we've updated it with our snappy new branding with the green flash. We've got some further updates which are planned for soon. One of them is about allowing the tutors to select extra time for learners, and not just learners who need that as part of their access arrangements. In addition, we've had an issue with the score reports showing pass regardless of the number of marks that a candidate's actually achieved. So we're going to do a correction for this, and we're going to run a webinar which talks through these changes and hopefully has a walkthrough of the platform to assist you to use it to its full capacity.
Okay, I think as we said, obviously using Open Assess is pretty straightforward for the most part, but just in case you aren't familiar with the system, here's a kind of it's like a walkthrough flowchart, just give you a little bit of overview of how it works and the steps that tutors particularly need to follow to ensure that both they and their learners are getting the most out of it. I mean, the first instance is tutors really do, and we can't obviously overstate this, need to familiarise themselves with the platform and all of the tools, especially so for maths, but also the item types used within English reading and writing. So, and obviously, if you as a tutor are not confident about using Open Assess, then it's far less likely that your learners will be. The familiarisation tests is there to help that walking through of those features and tools. And again, I really would say use that as much as you can to demonstrate it. What I've seen sometimes is people demonstrating it in class on a whiteboard, as well as setting up familiarisation tests for individual learners to practice on their own. Again, the chart and graph tools for maths are particularly likely to need a bit of time invested to ensure learners really get to grips with those before having to use them in a live exam. Do also check in with learners after they've worked their way through a familiarisation test. How did they find it, etc. And don't forget that for some learners, you may find even after doing all that, that taking exams on paper might be a more suitable option, and that might be the moment to reconsider whether on screen is really going to give that learner the best chance of success. The next step after that is to set learners a practice paper. Tutors can do this, but they will need to send the link, PIN and key code to the learner. The system used to allocate practice papers, it previously used to allocate practice papers versions automatically, but it's now possible. One of the recent changes we've made was to allow those to be selected manually, particularly if you really wanted, for example, to give learners version C or version B or whatever it is you particularly want to use. Once they've sat that paper, tutor will then be able to access the learner's responses and mark those. But in order to do this, they will need to grab a copy of the relevant mark scheme for that version from the 4748 qualification documents page. Once they've assigned marks for those questions that aren't marked automatically, and a few of the questions are, they can then schedule in what's called a candidate review to go through the learner's responses to each question in detail. It might then be a good idea for the learner to attempt another practice test, either the same version, if you're looking for a like-for-like comparison, or a different one. But again, the marking and the candidate review processes are there to help ensure that the learner receives meaningful feedback afterwards. Once you're satisfied the learner's ready, they can then be booked in for a live exam on the live Evolve system. But before we move away from Open Assess, it is worth saying, and we've covered this quite a lot during sort of networks over the past year, worth saying quite a bit about marking in general. Our examiners will literally spend whole days being trained on each individual live paper that they are authorised to mark. So it is fair to say that any tutors marking sample papers will need to spend quite a bit of time studying the mark schemes and applying those quite carefully, as well as standardising their marking decisions with other colleagues. Something we've, as I said, focused on quite a lot during particularly our maths networks over the last year, and it's certainly be a topic we'll be continuing to support you with during the next round of Connect Share network events. So this camera's back on again. So what we're now going to do is allow you to sort of ask any questions. I can see a couple have appeared sort of in the last sort of few moments, so we'll just take a quick look at those.
So somebody's asked whether the sample paper 5 for maths is actually on the platform. I'm afraid it's not at the moment. So because of the movement from Flash to HTML, the assessment teams have been really tied up with transitioning between those two computer languages, and it hasn't really left as much time as we would like to get additional materials on Open Assess. So we've got it it's quite a high profile with Catherine, Paul and myself, so we will keep nagging, and we will let you know as soon as we're able to put any additional sample papers on the platform.
Thanks. I think there's another question which was just simply about whether the session's being recorded, as we indicated that earlier on, which we'll be adding this to the Maths English Resource Hub shortly.
I have to say that's the most popular question we ever have, usually before we even get the first breath out. So from our point of view, from a communication point of view, how can we best let you know what we have available and how we work? Is there a way that would work for you as practitioners and managers to let you know things like we always record our webinars and we always put them on the Resource Hub? How's the best way to present that information? We'd be really curious about that. I think it's one of our challenges, isn't it, Paul and Catherine, is in our heads we know what we're going to do for support, but it's not always easy to make that transparent for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question, Amanda. Definitely.
I mean, I think having obviously just put together a calendar of events for the next few months, we're obviously keen to share that and make people aware of that and as aware of that as they can be, and make the process of booking onto those as straightforward as possible. I guess there's always a danger of if we're putting dates in too far ahead, people tend to lose sight of those. But equally, I think conscious that everyone's diary, everyone sort of is usually, particularly at this time of the year, very much getting kind of into grips with possibly new timetables, new groups, new cohorts, and all the rest of that, and that can often be a distractor in a good way, but nevertheless a distractor. But obviously that's something that to think about as well for ourselves. But I think it's I suppose the answer is we keep plugging away at that and thinking of other ways, but obviously always, I think we've always said this, any suggestions would be welcome.
I see there's a question from Chloe there about Maths Level 2 pass rate. So this is often a hot topic because we know that nationally there have been some challenges learners have found with the reformed maths papers. We haven't got an updated pass rate at the moment. That's definitely in the calendar to do an update since the last one that's available on the website. I think what's been really interesting, we've done a lot of soul searching internally, is we went back to the to the legacy functional skills maths, and we pulled off the pass rates for that qualification because we took particular note of those as following the thematic review in 2015. What's really interesting is that after the initial blip for level 2 maths, the pass rates have steadily climbed, and they are not now that far off what they were for the legacy version of the qualification.
That's yeah, it is an interesting kind of point, that, isn't it? Because they I think there's always something that we tend to talk about called sawtooth effect, which is when inevitably you change something, it has an impact on how well learners are likely to do. And we will tend to, certainly happens with general qualifications, but also this area, we'll do a little bit of, if you like, cutting learners a little bit of slack in that initial period in terms of where things like pass marks end up setting. But inevitably you get to the end of that process, and that can sometimes have a little bit of usually hopefully a soft landing, but a little bit of a landing nevertheless in terms of where that can sit. But certainly what I guess we're almost likely to have, and obviously we've had the double whammy with these reforms of them coming into play just as COVID hit as well, and obviously that's had, I think we're bound to say, some impact as well.
Yes. Yeah. So there are a couple of comments there about useful ways of communicating from Sian and Maria. Thank you. Maria suggested a news panel on the side of the 4748 page. Do you know what? We would love that. Unfortunately, the style of page, the way that that particular page is created in the website doesn't allow for that. I wonder, though, whether it would be useful having a section actually in the blurb at the top on the information page. Maybe there's a little box with latest news or something. We have tried to use the email updates as a way to flag things. And what did I think Sian suggested something? The monthly check-in sessions were a useful way of sharing information. So that's kudos to Paul and Catherine for doing those. There's some interesting feedback here, isn't there, about maths? So lots of our learners have English as an additional language, so find the wordy questions more of a challenge than the actual maths. So that's an interesting one, and you have to bear in mind that the idea behind functional skills is that it's testing the application of maths, and that interpretation of the questions is part of the challenge, and that is always going to be a challenge for learners whose first language is not English, because if I'm really blunt, the qualification isn't aimed at people other than native English speakers. That's not to say that you can't use it, but it is always going to be a challenge, isn't it?
I guess it's helpful from our point of view, though, if there are particular language barriers that we can do more about to try and sort of help smooth the path. As we say, obviously that problem-solving aspect of this is been to some extent the core part of the purpose of functional skills. But if we are, particularly if we're using terminology, or if we're using concepts that particular cohorts of learners are likely to struggle with, and I don't think there'll ever be a perfect answer to that, in the sense that if we try to create assessments for such a wide audience, there are always going to be things that might cause problems. But I guess it's trying to minimise that as much as we can. And
don't stop telling us. Actually, I think although we can't come up with a solution straight away, having feedback from you about this is very useful, because we're able to feed that back into the business. So I know it doesn't feel like we do anything about it, but it is very useful for you to keep telling us these things, because we can then present them. I'm just a bit mindful of time, Paul and Catherine. Shall we move on for now? Obviously, what we'll do is leave the question box open towards the end of the webinar, and then people can add points, and we'll come back to them later. Would you like to move on? Yeah. I think this was to you. Is it, Catherine?
Yeah, thank you for that. I was just about to give that little push. I'm just conscious of time. No precious is really right for everybody. So before we wrap up, included throughout the webinar are useful links, but just to add here at the end are some useful email addresses. So for general queries, including remote invigilation and evolve issues, you can contact our centre support team. For any maths and English queries, you can contact one of us directly via the pre-employment inbox. Also, if you want further information regarding our platforms, you can contact the digital solutions team. But before we say goodbye, so Paul doesn't want to click on this now.
No, go on.
I'm going to have to click it, Paul. Sorry.
We couldn't end the webinar without saying goodbye to Paul on his last pre-employment webinar. So you've been with us from basic skills through key skills to functional skills, both legacy and reformed. You have seen quite a lot of changes in your time at City and Girls, and the pair of us would just like to wish you well in your new ventures. Thank you for your sterling work, and you and your encyclopedic knowledge will be very much missed, Paul. So best wishes for the future from the pair of us.
Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you, everybody. I mean, this is, as I said, I think we kind of announced at the end of June that I was going to be leaving. I'm staying within the education arena. I'm taking some time out this year to do a Masters in Adult and Community Education. So I will be certainly continuing to take an interest in this arena, and certainly around literacy, language and numeracy, having lived through all of these various reform programs and all of the other sort of policy changes over the years and everything else that's gone with that. But what I'll certainly do is miss these sessions. I'll certainly miss the contact that I have with anyone who works with Sitting Girls, and I'm sure that I will continue to pop out here and there somewhere in the future. So for one sort of last time from me, it just remains to say, obviously, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It'll be Catherine and Amanda running the next session. We've got obviously the entry-level session this time next week, well, I was going to say next Thursday morning, that'll focus on the changes to entry-level, and then the digital resources webinar on the 27th of September. You can register individually for any of our webinars via the events webinars and networks web page. We'll do what we always do, which is keep this session running in the background for a few more minutes at the end, just in case you have any further questions or queries for us to take away. But thank you again, and hopefully, well, Catherine and Amanda will certainly see you again next time. So goodbye from us.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.